This afternoon, I tried to substantiate the statement that Savitri is primarily a spiritual epic, a new kind of epic, and it is called a spiritual epic. Primarily, reading it the right way itself becomes a sadhana. It's not, you are not reading it primarily for its poetic excellence. We have plenty of poetic excellence in the world. We have Goethe, we have Shakespeare, we have Keats, we have so many other people. That it's also poetically excellent is a bonus, but we primarily do not go to it for its poetic greatness, but we go to it because it has this mantric value. It speaks directly to our soul, but anything to do with the soul is not automatic. It has to be cultivated. It requires certain sadhana, it requires a certain discipline. Later on, there is a passage in Savitri itself which gives us some hints about how to read Savitri. If I feel energetic enough during this evening session, I will read that paragraph, or maybe do it tomorrow. How is the mantra to be taken in, and what does a mantra do? All this Sri Aurobindo himself has explained in different places. And as I told you this morning, that even its subject thematically, it's about Ashwapati's inner experiences, 22 cantos of that, and 7 cantos about Savitri's inner experiences, Savitri's exploration of the inner worlds, 29, 22 plus 7 is 29, and Savitri's experience of death and the various phases of death, which are described in books 9, 10 and 11, about 7 cantos. Those also I regard as part of Savitri's yoga. Before you can conquer death, you have to understand all its manifestations, and Savitri does that in those books. So, if you add those 7 cantos too, you have about 36 cantos directly talking about yoga out of 49. So, in that sense, it is a spiritual epic, epic of yoga. Reading Savitri in the right way, or training oneself to read Savitri in the right way, is itself a yoga. That is what the mother has said in that little pamphlet which has come out, which Mona Sarkar reproduced from memory what mother once had told him about Savitri. The second thing, of course, here is there are various kinds of hints. What is meditation? What is mantra? How should one do it? Why is it that after a certain progress in yoga, you will find this is quite common, after you have made some progress, suddenly you find there is a roadblock. Not only do you find a roadblock, you suddenly find that you have coming down, and you are coming down very fast. And this is a very common phenomenon in all yogic practices. And Sri Aurobindo talks about it. Why is it that in the early stages we suddenly find a kind of push, and we are very optimistic and hopeful and so on, and we seem to be making progress, and maybe after 1 or 2 years we suddenly find that we are in the reverse gear. We are not, instead of going in the front, we are going sliding backwards. Why does this happen? Is this because the yoga is difficult? What is it indicative of? Even that aspect is taken up here, and it's a beautiful passage. But the only problem is, if I read those passages, I will not be making any progress beyond canto 3 of book 1. But I just want to indicate where that passage is, may not read it in all its details. Just to give you an idea what kind of help this consists or contains for our own sadhana. The passage I have in mind is the one on page 34. I will just add enough so that you don't get stuck, but I won't elaborate on these passages. Ashwapati has started his yoga, Ashwapati has made some progress, and it comes a stage when he finds he is not making any progress. In fact, he is sliding down, sliding backwards. And in India, it's a very, very well known is yoga bhrashta, or you have patan, you have fall from the yogic status. It's quite a common phenomenon. Why does this happen? And he explains it. Only a while at first these heavenlier states These large, wide poised upliftings could endure. The high and luminous tension breaks too soon. The body's stone stillness and the life's hushed trance, the breathless might and calm of silent mind, or slowly they fail as sets a golden day. Just as you have a setting of a golden day, the golden day of your sadhana suddenly begins to set and you are perplexed. What went wrong? What is it I have done wrong? The restless, and there are many reasons for it. One reason is the restless nether members tire of peace. See, when somebody decides to devote his life to for a spiritual quest, then what really happens is that something central in your being has taken that decision. But we are not all of one piece. There are in us several people, several aspects of our personality. And when this central being begins to dominate and takes this decision, the others that are not in tune with the central being raise their voice feebly and says, what about my agenda? What about my fulfillment in life? I wanted such and such. But the central being is so dominant, it says, keep your mouth shut, as it were, and it takes the decision, and we have gone and we have taken this plunge and we have joined the ashram or we have done one of these things and we continue. Now, there comes a stage when the central decision that thing within you had taken, which has taken this decision, gradually becomes a little quiet and weak, when the other parts of your being, which were not in line, which had their own agenda, then begin to assert themselves. In other words, what happens is, this is an occasion when parts of your being which are not in tune with your central being begin to assert themselves, and they want their own things. And that's why I have seen people who have spent several years in the ashram, suddenly they disappear and not heard of for many, many years. And then again after 10 years they come back and seem to be able to pick up from where they left off. It doesn't mean these 10 years were a waste. There come periods in an individual sadhana when you need time to convince these recalcitrant members of your being, as it were, that they should also fall in line. And when there is a fall, it's an indication to you that there are parts in your being which are not in harmony. And it is then, it becomes a responsibility. You take a torch, as it were, go within yourself, looking at each corner where these other elements which are not in tune are hiding, and slowly cajole them, convince them, and bring them along. And so you become more and more a whole person, become a harmonious person. We are all of us not one whole unit. We have very many rebellious parts of our being which are not in tune with the central part, which is very, very common. There is nothing unusual about it. And the more the rebellious parts you have, the greater is going to be your final siddhi, your final perfection, because you have such richness in your being. You know, God doesn't waste any of these things. He has given you this complex personality, and they all pull you in different directions. It only means that when you have reached the goal, your siddhi, your fulfillment will be much more complex, much richer. But right now you are in a hurry, you want to get there, and you feel, I am not able to get there. And that's why he says, what happens in such times? He says, the restless nether members tire of peace. Oh, I don't want peace. I want activity. I want, be up and doing. And spiritual life is a boring life. There is no activity here. There is no fulfillment here for me. You know, when you go to the ashram, what happens? You go to the dining room, have your food. There is hardly any opportunity, unless you seek it, for vital exchanges, for gossiping and so on. And this is what on which our inner being really flourishes. Opportunity for talking loosely, talking all kinds of things. In the ashram, we have no opportunities. What do? You come back to your room. And what do you do in your room? You sleep. So, the experience of most people when they first go to the ashram is they sleep most of the day and night, because there is peace there, and all the other parts of your being have no, they look for fulfillment and you deny the fulfillment to them, and they get tamasic. This is not a very healthy state. They become tamasic and so they sink into sleep. This is what happens. And then they say, I don't want this peace. The external life, the outside life, its excitement, the kicks it gives. Of course, sometimes it is painful, but there is excitement in this life. It keeps me engaged. And in this spiritual life, there is nothing of that kind. So, this is the stage, and therefore, he says, the restless nether members tire of peace. And then what happens? A nostalgia of old little works and joys, a need to call back small, familiar selves. How nice we were, we just get together over a beer or a cigarette, and we just went on talking about all kinds of nonsense for hours and hours. How happy we were in those days. You begin to think of the old familiar joys you used to have. To tread the accustomed and inferior way, the need to rest in a natural pose of fall. You see, the vertical position is very painful. The best is horizontal. You lie down on earth and be relaxed, and you begin to say how happy we were in those days. Ashram has proved to be a prison instead of taking us to something else. And this is a phase when you haven't yet started harvesting the spiritual riches, and your vital does not anymore get the pleasure it used to get in the old life. So, the new tomorrow is yet to be born, and the glories of yesterday are lost. So, in a no man's land, it's a very, very difficult period in sadhana. But once you begin to get the fruit, the harvest of your new status, then of course, nothing can hold you back. But then does come a period when everywhere it is dry. There is no joy, there is no spontaneity, and spiritual life appears very dull. Therefore, he says, to tread the accustomed and inferior way, the need to rest in a natural pose of fall, as a child who learns to walk can walk not long. After some time, the child automatically turns to the mother and wants to be lifted up, although the child can walk now, but he doesn't want to walk. As a child who learns to walk can walk not long, replace the titan will forever to climb. On the heart's altar, dim the sacred fire. The sacred fire of aspiration, which has carried you through all kinds of struggle, that now begins to be dim. An old pull of subconscious chords renews. All the things that you didn't want on the surface consciousness, you have pushed them down in the subconscious, and these characters are very interesting. They wait for another opportunity and they begin to exert their pull. So he says, an old pull of subconscious chords renews. It draws the unwilling spirit from the heights, or a dull gravitation drags us down. Even if nothing, it's always easier to slide down than to climb up. It's a natural tendency. It's very easy to slide down because that the gravitation force is pulling you down, and to climb against the gravitational force you constantly require exertion and effort. And so when you refuse to put in this effort that is needed, automatically you begin to slide down. Or a dull gravitation drags us down to the blind driven inertia of our base. But Sri Aurobindo says there is nothing to worry in spite of this, because, as he says, this too the supreme diplomat can use. The divine is a supreme diplomat. He knows how to use even this. This fall that you describe can, when you fall is a thud and it's like a springboard. The force with which you fall, the divine diplomat uses that, and you rebound back, and next time you come up, you are even higher than from where you fell. So, this is an opportunity for you. This opportunity given by the divine is for you to look into yourself, and as I said, persuade, cajole the recalcitrant elements in you to fall in line. And once that happens, you are up again, once again. And then again, maybe after 2-3 years, after some stage, again there may be another phase when you come down. Now, this goes on, this seesaw is quite natural in everybody's spiritual life. So, nobody need to feel flustered or worried. You say, why is it I am not making a constant progress? Constant progress is unknown in spiritual life unless you have already put in this tapasya in an earlier life and you have come here all formed like Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, as you know, had done all this sadhana, and the Totapuri was a great adept in the Vedantic, Advaitic sadhana. And he came, he was almost naked. He came along the Ganges and came up the Ganges, and this Ramakrishna was sitting in a corner. And when he looked at him, he felt great attraction towards this young man. And he said, I want to teach you, I want to give you the Advaitic initiation. Do you want it? Ramakrishna was almost like half insane. He suddenly stood up. What did you say? I want to give you initiation into Advaitic realization. Do you want it? He says, wait, I'll go and ask my mother. So he rushes to the Kali temple and literally asks his mother, this gentleman has come and he wants to give me this initiation. Shall I take it? And presumably she has said yes. And he comes and says, yes, the mother has said, yes, you can give me the initiation. And when the initiation is given, this Totapuri himself got this realization of 40 years long tapasya. And Ramakrishna has the realization in 3 days, just like Sri Aurobindo having in 3 days silence of the mind. And on the third day, when Ramakrishna got into samadhi, this Swami, his guru, locks up the cottage and sits at a distance, hoping that he will come to regain his consciousness, maybe after 2 hours, maybe after 3 hours. And when he does that, I should be available to him, and I will go and open the key lock, because you should not be disturbed when you are in samadhi. So he sits there, the night is gone, the whole day, next day is gone, another night is gone, another day is gone, Ramakrishna is still in samadhi. He says, this is tremendous, because I never had this kind of an experience even after 40 years of my tapasya. So there are people like that. So if you don't have to struggle too hard in your life, or if you find a neighbor of yours who doesn't have to struggle very hard, you can conclude he has done this work in a previous life. And this labor everybody has to do, and there is no escape. There is, either you do it now or you do it next life, or this is something everybody had to do. And so there is nothing unusual, and one doesn't have to get greatly upset and worried if you find that you are not making a constant progress. There is a dull period, and maybe you have even been sliding down for some time. He says, this too the divine diplomat can use. He makes our fall a means for greater rise. He makes our fall a means for a greater rise. For into ignorant nature's gusty field, into the half ordered chaos of mortal life, the formless power, the self of eternal light, follow in the shadow of the Spirit's descent, the twin duality forever one, chooses its home mid the tumults of the sense. He comes unseen into our darker parts, and curtained by the darkness does his work, a subtle and all knowing guest and guide, till they too feel the need and will to change. The divine, in those moments when you feel totally deserted and your sadhana is not going on, the divine in fact has descended into you, and he has taken in his hand a little torch, and he suddenly lights up this area. Look, this is here where the thief is hidden. You have to pull him out, and you have to convince him, and you have to take him along. This process of purification, this process of self detection, detection within yourself of these hidden places where as I said, the recalcitrant elements hide, these are exposed. And so the point is, if any one of us feels that we have not been making progress, it is because something within us is holding it back, and we need to look at ourselves and ask, what is it within ourselves that is holding us back? And then persuade it and make it fall into line. So there are passages like this which are directly through a flood of light into what happens when one takes up to spiritual life seriously. There is another kind of help that we get here, and that is once you turn to spiritual life, there never can be any accident in your life. Everything is happens has a goal, has a purpose. And normally we try to make sense of what happens on our surface life. We have done some work, we have exerted ourselves, we expect a certain success. But then if we look at life, we find there is no such logical connection. Somebody who hasn't done any work, he has a rich harvest of success, and people who do a lot of work don't get success. And there doesn't seem to be any pattern, any logic in the outward life. Then slowly you begin to realize what happens in your outward life is primarily decided by the needs of your soul. The human soul, the human psychic, has no preference for success and victory. It is the mind, the human mind, that is attached to success and victory and name and fame. For our psychic, any kind of experience is good enough. The psychic benefits as much from success as from failure. And failure is a necessary experience for psychic to grow. And when the psychic calls for an experience of failure, there is nothing you can do to convert it into success, because that is the inner need. So once you turn to spiritual life, you do not look upon the surface happenings in your life as an ordinary man does. There is an inner reckoner, and that inner reckoner is the need of your inner growth. And whatever you have to have, whatever experience you have to have, the divine gives you, including illness. Illness is tailored to your spiritual need. I firmly believe in this. And when the illness comes to you, the divine has chosen this. Nothing happens in the world except with the consent of the divine. That is for sure. And if that happens, maybe the divine wants you to go through a certain discipline, and this is what he wants. So, the other view here he develops here is, for a man who turns to spiritual life, he doesn't look at external happenings in his life as things which are autonomous. The external happenings have the reason, and the reason is in the needs of your soul. And he talks about it on page 52. Little bit I can read because the whole thing is developed very well in several pages, across several pages, but I will just read a little bit. This is from 8 lines from the top of page 52. He says, but few can look beyond the present state or overleap this material hedge of sense. All that transpires on earth and all beyond are parts of an illimitable plan. The one keeps in his heart and knows alone. Our outward happenings have their seed within. Our outward happenings have their seed within. If you succeed in your external pursuits, if you suddenly begin to make a lot of money, it's not because suddenly you have a streak of genius which has started flowering. It is because this success is the need of your inner being. And the same thing can go the reverse. We have seen many, many intelligent people. When they are, they are very intelligent. We have compared ourselves with them. But when they step into the business world or in the professional world, somehow success seems to elude them. You wonder why. In other words, you are so brilliant. He wrote the best essays in our class. He did this, he did that. But I, with my kind of mediocre talent, I have gathered this much success in life. What about him? His destiny is different. The inner need is not success, his inner need is something different, so he goes along that route. So, in spiritual life, therefore, comparison of yourself with someone else, that also doesn't help, because your inner needs are different from someone else's inner needs. And the external happenings, you don't look very surprised if something happens to you. You have to start looking within yourself. Why did this happen? what is the inner cause which brought about this outer result. So, this is what he is saying. Our outward happenings have their seed within, and even this random fate that imitates chance. Fate is that aspect of our life which doesn't seem to have any coherent logical plan. It seems to be just something that happens, just chance. But the poet wants to assure us there is nothing like chance once you turn to spiritual life. And it is such that once you turn to spiritual life, you can really, if you really turn to spiritual life, if you have a horoscope, you can just destroy it, because whatever horoscope says is unlikely to come true, because the horoscope only operates at a certain level when you are at a certain level of consciousness. When you transcend that level of consciousness, try to go beyond it, the horoscope has no sense, no meaning. And so he says, for a person who has turned to spiritual life, uh, even this random fate that imitates chance, this mass of unintelligible results, are the dumb graph of truths that work unseen, because these truths are not seen on the surface of your life, but they are there, they work in the interior, in the inner level. The laws of the unknown create the known. The events that shape the appearance of our lives are a cipher of subliminal quiverings, which rarely we surprise or vaguely feel, are an outcome of suppressed realities that hardly rise into material day. They are born from the spirit sun of hidden powers, digging a tunnel through emergency. But who shall pierce into the cryptic gulf and learn what deep necessity of the soul determined casual deed and consequence? What looks like a casual happening, there is nothing casual in this world. This is determined by a deep need of your soul. But we don't know what need the soul has. We only need what the mind wants. The mind wants transition from one triumph of success to another. It hates failure, it hates defeat, it hates all these things. But the soul has no such attachment to success, because it learns, it learns, gets everything from this experience. It's like it gets a kick as much from failure as it is from success. This is the point he makes. And I think once we turn to spiritual life, very often people turn to spiritual life hoping that they have taken the best spiritual insurance possible. And I have scored everywhere, and I found the best policies available from Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and I have taken that policy. So as a result, now my life will be very smooth. This is not true. Your progress will be guaranteed, but what you have taken is a spiritual policy. You have not taken a material policy. We are lucky, except in that, in the policy that Sri Aurobindo and the mother sell does not exclude your material life or its success. That also includes it. That's a different matter. But don't expect your troubles to disappear just because you have turned to spiritual life. On the other hand, they may increase for a while. Just because you turn to spiritual life, your troubles begin to increase. This is a very strange phenomenon, because you are saying to God, "Oh God, I want you," and the God has this tendency of taking you very seriously. You didn't mean it seriously, you see. But God takes you seriously. When you turn to God, we are saying, "Oh God, this is the agenda I have. Now I am incapable of fulfilling it by myself. So I am enlisting your help. Please take it over and make sure that all the items in the agenda are fulfilled." This is how we all begin. There is no need to feel ashamed of it, embarrassed of this. This is the beginning stage. We trust the divine and hope that he will help us, etc., etc. And gradually, as you go through this experience, there comes a time when you really can say, "Oh God, I don't even know what to choose. You choose for myself what you think is good for me. Once you have come to that stage, then you can really say you have reached a stage where you can say, let thy will be done. Until then, we say, keep saying, let thy will be done, but there is a footnote, make my will thine. This is, this is a very interesting story I very often narrate to friends. This from Swami Vivekananda's life. When Swami Vivekananda became attracted by Ramakrishna, for a long, long time he was hesitating. Is there any real truth in this spiritual life, or is it all a humbug? And during that time, suddenly his father died. Vivekananda's father died, who had a good job, but he used to spend a lot of money helping poor students, neighbors, etc. And they found the family kitty was virtually empty. And there was nothing in it. And Vivekananda was the eldest son, or maybe one of the elder sons, and there was a whole lot of other brothers and sisters, etc. And they had to be fed, and there was no regular income. And Swami Vivekananda decided, I will get myself a job. And Calcutta and Bombay are two places where you can easily get a job. And the most dim-witted have gone to these places and have been able to get a job. But God's Leela is so strange. Swami Vivekananda, who subsequently came to Chicago and shook the whole religious world of that time, was unable to get a job in Calcutta. He went round scoring from one office to another office. They said, sorry, he didn't just get a job. And very often there is a story, there is a reference to his life, that he used to go to sleep at night hungry. And when he came home, his mother would say, Narendra, come and have your dinner. He knew if he had his dinner, his mother would go to bed hungry without a food because there was not enough. So he would pretend and say, no, 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 I'm full. Such a friend of mine had his birthday party and I was invited, and I had rasagullas, I had this, that, and the other. I can't even take even a glass of water. I'm quite full. He used to sleep like that. And Ramakrishna knew about this pathetic condition in their family. So one day when he had gone to visit Swami Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna said, look, I have been worshipping this goddess in this shrine for all my life. And today I have just finished the puja. I assure you, you go into the temple, close the door behind you, and stand before the deity and ask whatever you want. I guarantee it will be given to you. It's my responsibility to see that the deity grants you whatever you want. And naturally, in that circumstance, Ramakrishna expected Vivekananda to ask at least, a clerical job or a superintendent's job or some job which will fetch him enough money to look after his family. And Vivekananda said, yes, yes, I will go there and I will ask. And once he went there and stood before the deity, looking at the deity, remember, he's an agnostic at that point. He is not fully convinced of whatever Ramakrishna was saying. He was on the borderline. He goes there, stands there, and the door shut. And as soon as he looks into the eyes of the deity, his eyes are filled with tears, and he says, oh, Divine Mother, give me discrimination, give me wisdom, give me detachment. And these are the things he asks. And at the end of 10-15 minutes, he comes out, and Ramakrishna asks him, did you ask the deity what you wanted? I don't know what I asked for, but I couldn't think of anything. I couldn't even formulate a wish. He said, you fool, you have wasted a wonderful opportunity. Go once again, he says. Again sends him. But it's the same thing he can do. That is spiritual life. That when you stand before the divine, you honestly can say to the divine, let thy will be done. You decide what is good for me and let that happen to me. That is what has to happen, and not, please, I respect you and I have taken this insurance, but make sure that all these things are covered. That's how we all begin. That is religiosity, that is religious life. I am not against it. That's how most of us begin. But it is no good kidding ourselves to say, I am leading a spiritual life. Why? Because I make an annual pilgrimage to Tirupati or to Pondicherry or to Banaras. If this transformation has taken place, that you are really in a position to say to the divine, whatever you decide for me, I will accept it very happily. You decide and I will follow. That's what it says. That do not therefore look at your external life as if it has a logic of its own. It doesn't have a logic of its own. What really has a logic is the need of your inner being, the need of your psychic, the need of your soul, and that's where you have to look into, and that's how you have to live your life. Now, guidance like this, which is so crucial to spiritual life, this is for me spiritual life. Not that you hold your nostrils or you do this or set your head, etc. If you live this kind of life, you're all automatically spiritual life. Things of this kind, there are plenty of these in the whole of this book. Later on, you will see there are, when Savitri's yoga is described, you also have descriptions of Kundalini rising and how Kundalini rises, what are the various stages through which Kundalini goes, and all these things are there. But these things which I just now read are not generally looked upon as spiritual guidance. This is in fact real spiritual guidance you get from books like this. I would like now to read another passage, which is a very interesting passage. And if I have time, wherever I talk about Savitri, I make it a point to read this passage. But before that, I think I'll take a small break.
What page is the?
This is the new passage I'm now going to read, is on page 59. Spiritual help you can get from the reading of this book. Some direct light and passages like this. There is one passage which I would like to now read to you, where the central message is what they say, Ma bhihi in Sanskrit, which means don't be afraid, don't fear. This is the passage I am now going to read, page 59. It's a small, beautiful passage. I don't know whether many people have noted it, but I was thrilled when I first read it, and then decided that I'm going to share it with almost everybody, every group that is willing to listen to me. It's a nice little passage. It says, even the background is really not even necessary to understand it. But the background is, he is talking about the way God controls this project called creation. And there are great forces here which intervene at crucial moments and bring about revolutions in the world. Revolutions just don't happen for historical reasons. That's only professors in Princeton and Harvard explain that way. But there is an inner reason for all these revolutions that come about. There are these forces which intervene, forces like Napoleon, they intervene, and the only function that Napoleon had was destroy the old world so that new world could be born. So Napoleon also in one sense is some kind of a vibhuti. There are forces like that in this world, but they are not easily swerved from whatever they have to do by human tears. They can't be bought by human tears. These are quite, they are used to this. So he's talking about these universal forces and the great issues that, in the evolutionary journey of man, etc., etc. Then suddenly small people like you and me begin to wonder, we are not such great people, we have nothing great about it, we are just small little individuals. What is there for us? Is there any guarantee for us? Is there any protection for us? This is the question we ask. We are not, we are not great leaders, we are not historical personages, then we are not required to play this role on this stage of history. We are small people. What about us? Does God has he taken note that we exist, or we are just just a number in his statistics? What are we? This is the kind of question very often people feel. Does my presence really matter to the divine who is running, who is in charge of this whole world? And I am in no way very special. Why should he bother about me? And this is addressed to worries of this kind. And he puts it very simply. He says, English is a beautiful language for this reason. With one not somewhere, you can deny a number of things. That is the domain of negation can spread across the whole sentence. Alive in a dead rotating universe. We were not here upon a casual globe, abandoned to a task beyond our force. He is denying a number of things through one just negation. by saying we were not here. What it means is we are not here alive in a dead rotating universe. For one thing, this is not a dead universe. Whatever the scientists may tell you, this is not a dead universe. This is a universe vibrating with divine presence. You and I may not have learned to respond to it, but this is not a dead universe. So, we are not people who just happen to be alive on a dead universe. This, for one thing, the universe is not dead. Of course, it's a rotating universe, but it's not a dead universe. Alive in a dead rotating universe, we whirl not here upon a casual globe. This is not a casual globe. I don't know whether Americans understand the word casual as well as we in India do, because we have something called casual leave, which is leave taken and then you approach your officer and say, I had to take the leave because my wife's cousin's grandfather's sister's grandmother's sister fell ill and I had to rush to her help. So I had to go, and so please mark, I didn't come to office, so that is regarded as casual leave. That is, casual leave is leave without any real purpose. You see, it's meant for leave that you take during emergencies, but this is how it is generally misused. In India, out of 365 days, since we have 3-4 religions practiced in the country and we want to be secular, so we want to give leave for all religious leaders' birthdays, etc. And now we have new leaders like Ambedkar and Gandhiji and so on, and we give leave for those. Sri Aurobindo doesn't require a leave because India chose to be independent on his birthday. So, so no day is wasted because of him. But there are Muslim festivals and Christian festivals and Parsi festivals and Sikh festivals and Hindu festivals and Jain festivals. And then there are new avatars like Ambedkar and this, that, and the other. So we have about, out of 365, about 265 days holidays for various reasons, plus 7 days, 8 days casual leave. And you are all puzzled in why India is not flourishing economically, because nobody is working, everybody is taking it easy. See, you fellows have problems getting leave, but we have no problems. The one thing that is plenty of available in India is leave. So casual leave, so casual globe. This is not a casual globe, that is a globe which has no purpose, which has no focus, which has no intention. This is it's not a casual globe. So he's denying all these things. The first thing is denying it. We are not here aliving on a dead universe. This is not a dead universe. This is not a casual globe. And furthermore, we are not abandoned here, abandoned to a task beyond our force. When the divine assigns you a task, you can rest assured that he is also giving you the power necessary to accomplish this task. In other words, the task given to us is to receive the supramental consciousness and rise in the next level. Now, if divine wants this, he has also, you can be sure, he also is going to give us the power and the force necessary to do this. Otherwise, how do you explain, without all the pundits from Harvard and Cambridge and so on, the universe has now come up to this stage, right from chaos to creation, and from the dead material world, gradually over several billions of years, a human being was formed. Where was the blueprint for the making of man? As if there is a certain secret intelligence behind this evolutionary journey. We see this. So it's not as if this is a, now there are other things to achieve and these have to come out. We also have always given the capacity needed to achieve this. Therefore, he says, we are not here alive on a dead universe. This is not a casual globe, and we are not abandoned here to a task for which God has given us, doesn't equip us with the adequate capacities. We will always be given adequate capacity to achieve this task. Then he says, even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall, an outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. What is the greatest mystery about our lives? something that we can't explain is called fate. Why Mr. X has to have the series of suffering he undergoes, why to have the series of windfalls that he has in his life, we can't explain this. And since we can't explain this, we say it is fate. So it is true that very often life takes an appearance where there is doesn't seem to be any logic. It all seems to be totally illogical. And so he says, even through the tangled anarchy, fate looks totally anarchic. Fate looks as if this is an area where even God doesn't exercise any control. It is spinning out of his control. That's what we think fate is. And the poet assures you this is only a superficial surface appearance. Whatever the appearance may be, even through the tangled anarchy called fate, and through the bitterness of death and fall. Death in human lives is such a tremendous tragedy. The loved one just disappears and he's gone forever, and nothing can bring him back. So there can't be anything bitter, more bitter than death. But there is something even more bitter than death, that is betrayal. Betrayal in love, betrayal in seems to be a system of governance which has no coherence, no logic. Evil is rewarded, good is punished. That's what we often feel, and that's how many young people lose faith in God. And I really believe that losing faith in God is a very healthy thing at a certain age, because the God we get is a God we have inherited. The inherited God doesn't take you very far. Just as inherited property doesn't take you very far, you have to earn it. So each one of us has to earn our God through our experience in life, and that is the real God. And before you can earn your God, you have to lose the God you inherited from your father, from your culture, from your country. Why am I Hindu? And the only reason I can give you is I was born in a Hindu family. I didn't choose to be a Hindu, and somebody who is a Muslim didn't choose to be a Muslim, he just happened to be born in a Muslim family. And this completely shuts our eyes from whatever else there is, and we feel committed that I must live this life as a Hindu, I must live this life as a Christian. Vivekananda said Hinduism is a good religion to be born in, but not a good one to die in the sense, if you are born a Hindu and forever remain only a Hindu, you haven't benefited from it. You have to grow beyond it. That's what he was trying to say. So all this, that the bitterness of death and betrayal and so on is there in life, but and so as I said, uh, when young people go through this experience, they begin to question God and they deny God, they become atheists, etc., which is, as he says, this is because life is so confusing, so perplexed. And the poet says, I do grant that life is all this confusing and all that perplexed. But I would like to tell you one thing. In spite of all this, I would like to assure you that there is an outstretched hand always at your back, trying to guide you, trying to support you. There is always an outstretched hand, he says. Outstretched hand. Where does it come from? When did it come? He explains. It is near us in unnumbered lives, bodies, and births. This outstretched hand hasn't made an appearance all of a sudden, it has always been there. We have never taken any cognizance of it. But the poet wants to say, just look back and you will find there is an outstretched hand always there to succor, to help, to push you in the direction you must go. But it is in outstretched hand is felt upon our lives. If there is an outstretched hand, then why did this outstretched hand not save me from all the stupid mistakes I have been making in my life? Why did this outstretched hand not pull me back when I put my foot on the banana skin and skidded and fell and had my ankle broken. Why, if there was this outstretched hand, what is the use of it if it doesn't help me in all these situations? What is this? It just observes that I skid and I fall, I break my knee, and this outstretched hand does nothing about it. Why is it that when I first went into a gambling den and started gambling, why is it that I won in my first gambling experience? Why did I not lose, so that forever I would have turned my back against all gambling dens? But I did win. As a result, I became addicted to gambling, and as a result, I ruined my life. What was this outstretched hand doing at that time? If there was an outstretched hand, it should have guided me on all those occasions. It didn't. What is it trying to do? This is the question. He says, it is near us in unnumbered bodies and births. But what is this outstretched hand? What is it wants to do for us? What is it holds for us? When he explains, in its unslackening grasp, it keeps for us safe. In its unslackening grasp, it keeps for us safe. What does it keep for us safe? He says, the one inevitable supreme result, the one inevitable supreme result. English is a beautiful language, you can push it further, you can add another clause. He says, the one inevitable supreme result, no will can take away and no doom change. Nothing in the world can cheat you of this. No will, no doom can change this. This is something very important. This outstretched hand is holding in its grasp. What is it? The crown of conscious immortality. It wants to put in your head the crown of conscious immortality. And then you begin to feel what I was saying in this morning. We are all children of immortality. And happiness is not something we should go looking for, begging for. Happiness is by nature, immortality is by nature. And it is that experience of your immortality, of your oneness with the supreme reality behind this universe. It is that experience this outstretched hand wants to give us. And therefore, if you fell by putting your foot on a banana skin and broke your knee, maybe that experience was necessary to hasten your advance towards the stage where you earn this crown of conscious immortality. Where would we like the crown, the outstretched hand to lead us? We would like the outstretched hand to lead us from one bank to another bank, from one successful deal to another successful deal. How many successful deals would satisfy you? Just tell me. What is the limit to human greed? How much success would satisfy you? Infinite. Yes. This is what it is. And so he says, it has one thing in purpose. It doesn't ensure you what your mind wants. It ensures you what your soul is aspiring for. And therefore he says, in its unslackening grasp, it keeps for us safe the one inevitable supreme result, no will can take away and no doom change, the crown of conscious immortality. The Godhead promised to our struggling souls. When I first read this, I almost imagined this situation. God there wants to people this world with people like you and me. So he's asking us, Mr. Nadkarni, are you willing to go down there? Where, sir? On earth. Oh, that's a terrible place. I don't want to go there. It's a terrible place. I am quite happy here. I am enjoying my immortality. I am a Satchidananda here. I am a part of you. Why would I go there into this world? It's a terrible place. I don't want to go there. It's a very terrible place. No, no, you go there. That's an experience by which you will be richer. You know, when you come back here, you will be richer by having spent some time on earth. So I would recommend that you spend some time there. No, sir, it looks a terrible place. It's worse than hell. I don't want to go to earth. Then God still keeps persuading us. Finally, he says, all right. Suppose I go down to earth. What is the guarantee I will be able to come back here? God says, I guarantee. It's my responsibility to bring you back here. And not only is it my responsibility, I give you this promise on stamped paper, and he gives us a signature and says, after an appropriate period of time, I will get you back here. So, after that promise was made and executed, we have come down here. And after coming down here, we have forgotten that we belong there and we have to get back there. God is sending us reminders, we put them in the waste paper basket. We don't want to go back. Because this is an enchanting world. There is endless shopping here, endless things to do here, endless finite things to pile up here. But that poor chap has given us this promise, so he has no escape. So he is the hound of heaven that chases us wherever we go. The hound of heaven is behind us and try to drive us towards that. And therefore, he says, the Godhead promised to our struggling souls when first man's heart dared death and suffered life. Before man could be persuaded to face life and suffer death, God promised to get us back, but now we have forgotten all about it. His reminders we safely ignore, but he finds ways and strategies of making us remember that we have to get back there. And he says, one who has shaped this world is ever its Lord. Very often we get this suspicion looking at what is happening in the world. Some of the most uh, painful things keep happening in the world. We sometimes think, is God someone like the Indian ministers? When their affairs of that ministry get very difficult, they come to the United States to study the World Bank, how the World Bank functions, hoping by the time they get back, the secretaries would have sorted out the problem. Is God someone like that, who is a kind of absentee landlord? That the affairs of the world have become very difficult, so he is taking his siesta. Why did God not notice Hitler? Oh, God was very busy, he was taking his siesta, he didn't notice Hitler. Can we say that? If Hitler happened, and Hitler, as I told, is the most terrible thing that could have happened, but God tolerated him for a while. There must be a reason, there must be a purpose. You and I can't understand this, because if you want to understand God's purpose, you have to bear in mind that you have to fit in a span of time which is 15 billion years long. That's how long the earth has been around. And God is planning not in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 100 years. If you can think of that time span, then only you can, anywhere think of this world and think what God has in mind. And so it's better we give up. Suppose I were to tell you, wait for another 15 minutes, I will tell you what is going to happen in this room in the year 3585. You would say, 3585, I have no interest in that. Our attention span doesn't extend to all that, but God has to look upon this. And if you look at all that, everything that happens here on this world must make sense. But for you and me, with our finite minds, finite perspectives, we can maybe 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, that's what we can think of. But if you are anywhere like God, you have to think of several billion years in the past and several billion years in the future. They very often say 10 billion years from now the sun will cool down, or there are all kinds of predictions. We just laugh them away because we have known, we know we won't be around 10 billion years from now. But if you are a God, you have to think of that perspective. And if you look at that perspective, then the Hitler episode, however painful it was when it was on, will have that, relatively, it's an insignificant thing. And maybe historians writing 1,000 years from now will look back and see that everything that happened may have, probably it had some purpose, it served some purpose. But of course, Sri Aurobindo said Hitler was a representative of the Asuric forces and so on. But what I am trying to say, even if these Asuric forces, God allows them to function for a while, and you and I in this world have to reconcile ourselves with this kind of a God who even allows things like this to happen. And therefore, he says, one who has shaped this world is ever its Lord. Our errors are his steps upon the way. ultimately one day you have to conclude. Somebody once, young man was asking me, so don't you think, don't you aspire sometimes that if God had given you more powers, he had made you more powerful, you would have been able to serve his cause better? He said, no, I used to when I was young like you, not anymore. Now I have reached a stage, God knows exactly how much power I can handle, and He gives me just that, and I'm more than happy with what He has given me. I don't aspire for more. So, the point I'm trying to make is that everything that happens in our life, even our errors, which look like errors to you now, when you look back on it 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now, you would wonder whether you are correct in saying that they were errors. What you regarded errors now were probably instrumental in taking you where you are today. And therefore, even our judgment of what are errors, uh, in India, we have, since I have the experience of Indian life, this is where I sometimes fumble when I talk to American audience, giving illustrations. I had a friend who was with me in the institute where I was teaching, and we came to California together. This is a long time ago, in 1968. Now, this man had a father in law who was conveniently placed, he was an engineer. So, while this man was here in the United States studying at UCLA, his father in law built him a flat, a good house in Bangalore, where you have the Silicon Valley of India and so on, climatically the pleasantest place in India, and if you have a house, it can fetch you an excellent rent, etc., etc. So at that time, I thought, if only I wish I too had a father-in-law like that, who could have built me a flat in in Bangalore. But I had no such father-in-law, so I just said, too bad, I don't have a father-in-law of that kind. Now, this gentleman I met after 20 years, 25 years subsequent later, and he was saying, I wish I didn't have a flat in Bangalore. I won't go into the details what kinds of problems he began to have subsequently because of his flat in Bangalore. The point I am trying to make, that very often we make judgments about what happens to us today, and we regard them as successes or failures, right things or wrong things. But if you look back 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you will see a pattern, and in that pattern, in that system, what at that time you regarded as errors probably were not errors. They were probably the right things that proved to be a spur for your subsequent progress. So that's what he says. Our errors are his steps upon the way. There is a famous story which you must be all familiar from the Reader's Digest and so on. This is a kind of story which Christian groups are fond of talking about, that somebody says to God, oh God, when I look back on the sands of life, I saw four footprints. You must be familiar with this story, four footprints all along the way. And so it means you must have been walking with me all the time. God nods his head because this is some compliment which is rare. God doesn't get this compliment. Yes, I was walking with you. Then he says, look, then I rechecked our entire the route, and I found there are periods of time when there are only two footsteps, and those I checked, double checked, and I found those were periods when I was going through a lot of hardships and difficulties and so on. Where were you in those days? You know the story. The Lord says, of course they were footsteps, but they were not yours, they were mine, and carried you in my arms. The point is, once you turn to spiritual life, you don't know in what ways, in what manner God helps you. Sometimes God helps you by forcing you to what you think make errors. Oh, I made this error, this is a bad investment, or this is a bad relocation, I shouldn't have done that. You regret that, but later on you will find that what looked bad at that time didn't ultimately turned out to be bad, so bad that it had its good results. And that's what he says. uh, our errors are his steps upon the way. And he says, God doesn't work only in meditation rooms and temples and seminars and retreats. He works through the fierce vicissitudes of our lives. He works through the hard breath of battle and toil. He works through our sins and sorrows and our tears. When you think you have sinned, you ask yourself, where was God? Why did He not prevent me from sinning? And He says, even when you sin, He's always by your side. And at night, when you go back to your bed and shed your lonely tears on your pillow, He's sitting there by your side. You are never alone. That's what He says. He works through our sins and sorrows and our tears. His knowledge overrules our nescience. We very often ask in our ignorance all kinds of things of God, and God's grace is the highest when He refuses to grant us our prayers, because He chooses what prayers to grant and He chooses what prayers to reject. And His rejections are a greater, turn out to be a greater sign of grace than the boons that He gives us. So He says, His knowledge overrules our nescience. At the end of it all, some people may say, sir, you are kind of creating a rosy picture of God helping us, but you have not listened to my story. Oh, I had to go through a particularly bad, harassed kind of life. Do you want to listen to my story? There are people who are likely to say that. So the poet says, whatever the appearance we must bear. Okay, and I do grant that you had a especially difficult life. Whatever the appearance we must bear, whatever our strong ills and present fate, when nothing we can see but drift and bail. There comes time periods in our life when we helplessly drift and see nothing but bale, evil, misfortune all around us. We are like helpless people thrown overboard from a ship, from a luxury ship. Suddenly we find ourselves in the middle of the night into the sea, into the ocean. We can't swim and we are very sure to go under. Life sometimes bears this kind of a threatening experience. I do admit that there are periods in life when you feel like this, and yet, he says, I assure you, what is it? Whatever the appearance we must bear, whatever our strong ills and present fate, when nothing we can see but drift and bail, a mighty guidance leads us still through all. In spite of all these things, I assure you, there is a mighty guidance behind your life which is leading you. And not only that, after you have served this great divided world, God's bliss and oneness are our inborn right. This is the crown of conscious immortality. God's bliss and oneness are our immortal right, inborn right. And he almost becomes like an, Sri Aurobindo almost as American exactitude. He says, your name he has already put down on the calendar. Appointment is already made. He says, a date is fixed in the calendar of the unknown. What date? The date of your rendezvous with God. There is no doubt it's only a question of time, but it's not a question of endless time. When you will meet with God and when you will earn your crown of conscious immortality, that date God has already put down in the calendar. He says, a date is fixed in the calendar of the unknown, an anniversary of the birth sublime. When this birth sublime will take place in your life, that is also put down. Our soul shall justify its checkered walk. All will come near and now, that now is not or far. This, as I said, is a passage which gives you great assurance that there is the outstretched hand behind all of our lives, and it can only lead us on to a position where we begin to feel that we deserve this crown of conscious immortality.
Question. As I was listening to this, the feeling of fatalistic position of saying, well, why bother? If God is really going to control all of this, why do I need to do anything?
Yeah, this is the same.
And that's the negative side of it.
Yeah, this is the same thing you raised with regard surrender. In the surrender, in the Gita, Arjun's impulse was to leave the battlefield and run away. What the Lord says to him is that you fight, but fight with this attitude of surrender to me. Surrender, in fact, should make you more active. Now, all that he's saying is not you don't do anything. So God is everywhere. But always bear in mind you are not alone in life. That's all the message is. You are not alone in life. It may look as if there are times when you are thrown on your own resources, you sink or you swim. It's not that situation. God is always there, and but there is no guarantee that things will happen which are pleasant to you. There may be unpleasant things, and when the unpleasant things happen, you must always have this conviction these unpleasant things are as much a part of the divine's plan as the pleasant things, because both of them have a role in shaping you, in forming you, in making you more deserving of the crown of conscious immortality. I think we should conclude and meet tomorrow.